Sir, we are on live.
Yeah.
You may
Okay.
start.
Okay. I wish good evening to all speakers, participants. As IQAC coordinator and head of the department, it is a matter of great pleasure for me today as the English department of Ranaghat College, that is my department, is going to organize the national webinar in coordination with IQAC. I heartily welcome on behalf of IQAC and department all the speakers and participants. I am grateful to speakers especially as they have responded to my request and devoted their valuable time for this webinar. This webinar is actually an effort to keep the wheel of academic activity running in this period of lockdown as the regular academic activity comes to a standstill. So we just try to keep up the academic activity to keep our students engaged through our online classes and digital seminar or webinar. Today's webinar will highlight Indian short stories in English. As most of us can identify with the characters, with the milieu, with the ideas found in those stories, I hope all the participants will find the discussion at the webinar today interesting. Particularly students, I think, will be benefited through the discussion at the webinar. I hope a grand success of the webinar. Let me stop here by conveying best wishes to all. Now I request our Honorable Principal to present his welcome address. Sir, please. Please, sir. Dr. Arup Kumar Maiti, our principal, will present the welcome address.
This estimated colleagues, dear students, gives to grace of on in India in English. Organized by Department of English of Ranaghat College in collaboration with IQAC. It is a glorious moment to extend my warm wishes on behalf of Ranaghat College. And Dr. by giving them to enlighten us with their true way. I want to convey my and we do and things will get normal. We have to carry on academic activity online. As a part of this effort, the teachers organize with their I'm and we have played an important attending will this webinar fruitful and honor to welcome all the participants and my fellow colleagues for taking a keen part in this. I am sure that you all will feel enriched with knowledge once again to the webinar.
Network issue. What to silent? Yes.
Good e-
Mm,
Hello.
mm.
Good
Many
evening,
thanks
everyone.
to our thanks to our principal. Now we will proceed to our business session, that is the that will be delivered by our honorable speakers. Today's webinar actually is focused on post-colonial elements in Indian short stories in English. As far as post-colonial nations are concerned, we all know they were reached by the foreign power earlier, and after independence they faced certain common issues. So there are certain common post-colonial issues facing the post-colonial nations. Particularly, we find hybridization in post-colonial nations. We find this also in Indian writings in English. I would like to refer to a particular title of short story of Kuzban's, but it is used for the English short story. We'll come to know about these things in detail from our honorable speaker. Our first speaker is Dr. Punita Jha. Now I like to request Srimati Soheli Mitra to introduce Madam, and then she will enlighten us with her talks. Now, please, Soheli, start.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. Today, our webinar is concerned with post-colonial elements in Indian short stories in English. The topic is quite relevant as these writings are generally prescribed in almost all the syllabi at UG and PG level. Now, we will have elaborate discussion about it. I am honored to take this opportunity to introduce our honorable speaker, Dr. Punita Jha. She is a senior professor of the Department of English of LN Mithila University at Darbhanga in Bihar. She obtained DLit for her outstanding work. She is the member of the board of directors of a literary journal, The Anvil. The Indian writings in English interest her most. Her published books are Rainbow of Love, Post-Colonial Consciousness in Indian Novel in English, a Study, feministic approach in Shashi Deshpande's fiction, Henry James's short story, a critical study. She is also associated with various academic and social activities. Today, the title of our talk is The Genesis and Prospect of Indian Short Stories in English. Now, I request Madam to start delivering her lecture.
Thank you, Saheli. Thank you, Saheli Mitra. Good evening to one and all presented in this one-day webinar on post-colonial elements in Indian short stories in English. At the outset, I would like to convey my respect to the chief patron, Dr. Anup Maiti, principal, and I sincerely thank Dr. Arunoday Mukherjee, IQAC coordinator and convener of this webinar. No work is accomplished without cooperation and coordination. Therefore, the organizing committee members need to be thanked also. And a few words for my respected sir. Today, whatever I am, it is because of my teacher, Professor P.S. Sanyal. He's also from Mithila University and he's a retired professor. His regular support and innovative ideas and motivation have sustained me during the sorts of research, all sorts of research and projects which I had undertaken. And whatever I have attained, he has been my supervisor for PhD and delete as well. So once again, I would like to thank my senior teacher, my guru, Professor P.S. Sanyal, and of course, the principal and the organizing committee. Now to begin with, I would like to know my lecture is basically a capsule. So, because this topic is very vast. First, you explain what is post-colonial, then you explain, like what are the elements of it, and then what a short story is. Since I've done my research, so, I've just jotted down a few points. That is why I've not gone in depth. But whatever I'm going to deliver, I hope it is understandable and the students will benefit by it. Post-colonial element in Indian English short stories. And that is, I'll give a brief introduction. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation for that. And then after that, through PowerPoint presentation, I will be tackling, the other aspects. That is, my subtitle is The Genesis and Prospects of Indian Short Stories in English. So now to begin with, what actually is post-colonial? Continuously, we are listening to post-colonial literature, post-colonialism, what is colonialism, the colonial rule, and all these things. Post-colonial is an intellectual discourse, is inextricably tagged with cultural legacies of colonialism and imperialism. It implies the freedom and political emancipation of the colonized from the colonizers and examines the cultural activities used by the imperial powers to overpower
Voice, hello. Voice not coming.
Now am I audible?
Yes, yes.
The cultural activities about the cultural activities of the colonized. Cultural activities used by the imperial powers over the people they had, the colonized and the colonizer. This is the relation between them. The history of colonialism is associated with imperialism and exploitation of the marginalized. So to impose their dominant, they tried to impose their dominance in cultural hegemony hegemony and to make the colonized people feeble and voiceless. The colonized people were exploited economically, politically, and culturally. This affected the psyche of the colonized people. The post-colonial studies are promoted in the recent years as it appropriates the right of all people on the globe equally. So that is why, it was promoted. It seeks to change the way people think, the way they behave. It refuses to acknowledge the superiority. One way we can say, that this is the top type of Marxism also of the Western culture. The tragic burden of colonialism still persisted, and the indigenous people are still treated with discrimination and amidst economic exploitation of the people on the basis of caste, community, color, religion, and language. It brings to memory the question of exploitation and revolt again and again, and reinvents the mode of cultural perception by recording human relation among the colonial nations and marginalized people who were exploited by the colonial. It is therefore aptly observed that the post-colonialism is a continuing process of resistance. Mark my word, resistance and reconstruction. That is exactly what is going on. And that out of experience of colonization. In the simple sense, post-colonial literature has something to do with adverse effects of colonial administration on the native people and their past, cultures, and rituals. As the term post-colonial implies, it refers to the new literature written after the end after the end the new literature written after the end of former colonial rule. Consequently, nowadays, terms like third world or developing national the developing national movements are preferred in literary or political discussions. In general, the post-colonial experiences presupposes migrant labor, slave trade, power struggle, and various kinds of ethnic conflict. But it also includes paradoxically rampant corruption, political instability, and lack of flexibility. In fact, internal conflict, bitterness among ethnic communities, and political indiscipline are other legacies which the colonized communities and societies have inherited. This, in a complex situation, post-colonial theory and literature addresses all the complicated issues. So, actually, the basic thing which I would also like to communicate is, when we define, post-colonial is an intellectual discourse inextricably tagged to the cultural legacies of colonialism and imperialism. This I've already actually done it. And now, after a brief introduction of this, I would like to move, to the other aspect, that how Indian society, when we take the Indian context, how it comes, what is the response of the colonial rulers. One of the most exciting features of English literature today is the explosion of post-colonial literature. Everywhere, people, they're doing research, and a lot of, we are just trying to find out what actually is meant by this post-colonial, how the people, people are migrating, the hybridity, all these are the various elements, which these themes, which the writers are just picking up, and they are using it either in the form of fiction, long fiction, short fiction, drama, poem, anything as such. So literature written in English in former colonized society. This has given rise to a range of articles, essays, short stories and all. Our Indian society witnessed a drastic change in the process of decolonization. Now, when does this literature come up? When, the process of decolonization takes place, it is that time that the psyche of the people are affected. The people are struggling. So that is the right time. The impact of Western education and industrial development led to radical changes in society. Now, there's great change going on in the society. So writers started focusing on the social issues of the society. Indian society in the colonial period was very rigid and was beset with social evils like the sati, widow, remarriage, the caste system, and the social and religious, as well as all kinds of hegemony. The primary aim of the writers of this period in most of the Indian vernaculars was to alert people of the consequences of these evils and also to bring awareness among them. They used theory writing as tool to bring these issues to the notice of the people of their time. In post-colonial writing, a greater emphasis was put on the process of colonization and attempt was made to record a strong resistance to the masters of the colonized societies, besides insisting on contemporary realities of life. Post-colonial writers engage themselves in opening up the possibilities of a new language that is most probably all of you have understood it's English and a new way of looking towards the world. Their theme focus on the issues like identity, national and cultural heritage, hybridity, partition, contemporary reality, human relationships and emotions, etc. There are so many topics which they were dealing with. Finally, the characteristics of post-colonial literature or the elements, that was basically appropriation of colonial language. That is English. Then the meta narrative, the colonizers, they did stories, they told stories, and then rewriting history, decolonization struggles, and nationhood and nationalism, and valorization of cultural identities. So, finally, I've just tried to sum up that these were the basic elements on which all the writers attempted, and we have a huge variety. In variety, we have post-colonial literature. Now, that is coming to the subtitle, I would like to just say the genesis. That was basically what I had prepared. But beforehand, I thought it is good to give an introduction. So now the genesis and the prospects of Indian short stories in English. I have a PowerPoint presentation, and I would I would request you to please start with it.
Yes, ma'am. It's
Sure.
visible.
Okay, this was my subtitle. I've just given a brief introduction, and now the first slide. Short story has a very long tradition. Its origin is as old as human civilization. As a literary form and an oral tradition, the short story dates back to prehistoric times. This is actually there in my first slide. I would like you to present my first slide. Yes.
Yes.
The evolution of short story began before human could write. It flourished as an important and engaging social art to aid in constructing and memorizing tales. The early storyteller often relied on stock phrases, fixed rhythms, and rhymes. The early stories, therefore, mark man's slow emergence from his animal status. The forms of the stories, like the form of rituals of primitive man, helped create for him his history and identity, and his creative impulse transformed him to a conscious human. Now, the second slide, the second slide I've just tried to say fables, parables, allegories, and oral narratives are the forerunners of modern short story. Aesop's fables, Ovid's metamorphosis. I'm talking about the worldwide, and then I'll be coming back to the Indian context also. Boccaccio's The Decameron and the Indian Jataka tales, the Panchantantra, Somdeva's Katha Sarit Sagar are among the forerunners of short story. The advent of its present form can be traced to the early 19th century and of its parent, the novel, that is the 18th century. The brevity of its narrative, single action, and thematic focus naturally met with a worldwide reception, and thus short fiction matured into an artistic genre. So, just see, how gradually it is maturing into an artistic genre. Now, I would like you to move to I think it is there, the brevity of the narrative, single action, and how, we are going to focus, on the limited thing, limited idea. Short story as a specific form of literature is of recent origin. That form, in order to get into the form of the short story, that is of the recent origin. Stories were told and retold again and again. I told you, as the fables, parables, allegories, all these were there. But as a genre specific, it developed much later. It can be traced to the efforts of Edgar Allan Poe, who excelled in the detective story. He also excelled with a kind of gothic spine chiller, that is the pit and one, I'm just naming one, that is the pit and the pendulum. With practice came comment and theory. In 1842, Poe himself, reviewing Hawthorne's twice old tales, expressed some general percepts on the short story, by which he meant a prose narrative of indeterminate length, requiring anything from half an hour to 1 or 2 hours in its perusal. A story that concentrates on a unique or single effect, and one in which the totality of effect is the main objective. So, this definition was basically, in the process of reviewing. So, I thought it important, and that is why I've included it. The emergence of realistic short stories in Russia around 1830 by famous writers like, I'll be naming, how short stories developed throughout the world, and then I'll be coming to the Indian context. Famous writers like Alexander, Pushkin, Gogol, Turgenev, Tolstoy. From France, we have Merimee, Balzac, and Gautier. In America, during the second half of the 19th century, 8 writers made a considerable name for themselves in the short story form. That is, I think most of you know it. You must have read Herman Melville's story, Mark Twain, Bret Harte, Ambrose Bierce, O. Henry, Stephen Crane, Jack London, and Sherwood Anderson. Henry James too wrote different types of short stories and made a lasting contribution to the genre. Many other writers around the world were active in the period. Thomas Hardy, a contemporary of Henry James, Arthur Conan Doyle, E.M. Foster, Catherine Mansfield, Conrad, R.L. Stevenson. In the early part of the 20th century, C.F. Kafka, between 1914 and 1934, we have D.H. Lawrence, were well over 100 general anthologies of short stories available in English alone. So that is how, it came, it was developed throughout. Regularly well-established stories of classics of this genre genre are recycled in new anthologies. Now, let me come to the Indian context. It was in 1898 for the first time Kamla Sathyanandan's short story collection entitled Stories from Indian Christian Life was published. It was after this publication that the journey of Indian stories began. A lot of experimentation was on in developing the technique, theme, and style. So they were just experimenting, and that is how it progressed. This is from the beginning, and how the short stories progressed. We're just coming to that. That is why I've included what were the major influences, what was happening around the world. All these concepts need to be understood before we do the final thing, that how these post-colonial elements also came into. A lot of experimentation was on in developing the technique, theme, and style of the short story. Ishwaran, who first published his collection of short stories, Naked Shingles, in 1941, established a reputation almost solely on the basis of his achievement. He was not an isolated phenomena, but a significant link in the chain of development of short story as a modern art form. Now, next, I'm talking about the next phase. Mulk Raj Anand, R.K. Narayan, and Raja Rao, who represent the first flowering, that is 1935 to 45, of this genre, responded to the nationalist movement, each in his own way. M.R. Anand, the social activist, presenting a true vision of Indian life. His most famous story is Lost Child, The Eternal Moment, The Cobbler and the Machine are the best stories. R.K. Narayan, with his perception of the average as positive, exploring the nature of life and reality, is An Astrologer's Day and A Tiger's Claw are quite famous stories. Raja Rao experimented with the form of short story. So Raja Rao their stories had a genuine flavor of the Indian scenario on the eve of independence. The second flowering that took place was in 1960-70, looked for answers to the question raised in the academic circle. Can the Indian sensibility be expressed in English? This was the this was the basic question, that was constantly, troubling the mentality of the people. Ruth Pravar Jhabawala detached involvement with the Indian situation, and Bhavani Bhattacharya's professionalism and the easy readability of his stories supply some answers to that question. The 1970s more than fulfill the expectation of the 60s. The decade is marked by an endless variety in the handling of themes and variations, coupled with varying modes and techniques of narration. Influenced by Russian, there was a major influence, and how these influences helped them in the process of experimentation and presentation, influenced by Russian and American short fiction. This is the reason why I gave you an introduction of the Russians, the French, the Americans, and all that, and American short fiction. It was between the period from 1980 to 2008. We have a galaxy of writers like K.T. and Daruwala, Anita Desai, Shashi Deshpande, Arun Joshi, Kamla Das, and a host of other participating in the ongoing process of openness in form, reliable and unreliable narration with multiple points of view and shifting focalization. There are more women writers now than at any time in the past, altering perspectives in man-woman relationship, alienation in modern life, identity crisis, and the impact of feminism and feminist theories on the academic academia have supplied food to a potential creative writer. As readership expanded across the world, or as we can put it, in the process of globalization, where man is now connected around the world, short stories are translated into the for a better understanding. And these translations help the people to be read all over the world. And transcreation has also helped in expanding readership around the world. When we deal with the growth and the future prospect, the names of diasporic writers come to my mind. The exclusive thing about Indian diasporic writing lies in the fact that diasporic literature has its root in the sense of loss and alienation, which emerged as a result of immigration and expatriation. Generally, diasporic writers dealt with dealt these diasporic writers, their themes were also similar. They dealt with the displacement, extensionism, rootlessness, nostalgia, that nostalgic feeling and quest, for identity. So there was identity crisis, and these were the short stories. They dealt with all these themes in the in their short stories and also in the long fiction. The first name which comes to my mind is Indian American writer Jhumpa Lahiri, interpreter of maladies, published in 1999, and Unaccustomed Earth in 2008 are short story collections which have won critical acclaim from all over the world. The other diasporic writers who excelled in this field were Anita Desai, Winton Mystery, Bharti Mukherjee, etc. They have also enriched this genre. Among new Indian writers of short stories, mention should be made of Ruskin Bond, Manoj Das, Shiv K. Kumar, K.N. Daruwala, Amit Chaudhary, and Shashi Deshpande. They too have tried to strike a new path, that is existential concern, alienation, immigration, and exile. Now, coming to the prospects, short story still continues to be a minor effort in Indo-Anglian literature. It still continues to bask in the reflected glory of the novels. Because there's a lot of experimentation and the best is yet to come. We have so many varieties of short story. It requires much serious effort to reach perfection of form, as short stories are the most challenging form in literature. The prospects of short story is bright due to the availability of high-tech audio-visual methods which recycles and reorients stories of the past related to our customs, tradition, religion, life, and all the other, coming up issues. The adapting of short stories in the form of telefilms has created an awareness, and it also sparks in our mind and forces us to think as ideas click. Now, that is because of the audio-visual effect. Moral stories which are projected with an audio-visual effect are the best way to teach life lessons to children. So, it creates an awareness also. They don't take so much time. And then the children, they love to watch, TV and all that. As they take interest in stories, we know that children are interested in stories. We can easily impart morals without being didactic. Global, global cross-cultural communication is easily viable as internet has connected us around the world, and cross communication has become a simple process. Today, if I'm delivering my lecture sitting at home over here in Bihar, and over there students are benefiting, this is the benefit. And naturally, when the time comes for stories, it becomes all the more interesting. Since short story within a limited span of time communicates a single seed of idea, curiosity to see and learn more prevails among the viewers. Thereby, I told you the prospects, are the future is very bright. For example, a series of stories adapted from an anthology and projected through the mass media or through the audiovisual, as in the form of film, whatever it is, we write it. We like to read again and again, and every day we are prompt on seeing it. So finally, I would like to, the prospects are bright, and I think, the bend of mind readership is more towards the short stories. And of course, the post-colonial elements are also included in it. So I would like to conclude by thanking all the organizers.
Thank you, madam, for your elaborate and thank you, madam, for your elaborate and enlightening discussion.
Thank you.
We have now very elaborate historical rather references along with the discussion on post-colonial issues. Now it is time for query and comment. Is there any participant who wants to make query or comment? Is there any participant? There is a.
Please unmute yourself.
I have unmuted.
Now, okay. If any participant have any query, please unmute and ask.
Is it or any comment from the participants?
Yes, sir. There are some comments from YouTube chat box. You are watching, sir?
Is there any question there?
Yes, so many questions from starting. So
You may refer to question to madam. Just read out it. You just may read. Okay. You may read out question.
Just 1 minute. Okay.
Yes.
Do you think that short stories of the Indian authors are popular among most of the common people of India?
It has become, it wasn't previously. Short stories are becoming popular, and that is the recent trend. Because due to the adaptation, in film, short stories are being adapted and it is being reviewed. History also, these historical short stories, mythical short stories, it is there in the audio visual. And people are sitting, those of us, we have not read, all the religious things, the stories of Panchatantra, as I referred to, is where all these things are there and it is being adopted. So that is how it has become more famous now. It wasn't earlier because people weren't literate enough, and they did not read. They loved to listen to it because that was the thing, process available. Technology was not that developed. But now, since technology has developed, so naturally, we are just moving. Each and every person, literate or illiterate, sit in front and to watch. And that is how they are learning. They are learning a lot about the traditional, the cultural issues, how, India has developed, what happened during the partition. All these things are being projected. And that is all, the short stories, like Gunzag's, Rabi Par and all that, there are a number of stories on the various issues, colonial issues, which are being projected. So I think we should be, with our TV, and we should be aware and we should read because it's really very interesting. And the limited time, we cannot afford to read, those thick novels now because of our busy schedule. Life is getting very busy. So now the present situation is such that people love to watch. Premchand's story, all the stories, all these writers who have written stories, it is in the process of being adapting so that, a number of the readership has increased.
I
Any
think
more questions?
Okay.
I think the participant has got the answer. Is there any other question?
Yes, one.
Good
Just
evening,
read out.
sir.
Read out.
Another question from SK Das. Are you think that short stories of the Indian authors that no. This I think this is read out. Okay, another.
Just read out.
Just check another question. Okay.
Sir, I have a
Uh,
question, sir.
Another question from SK Das. Are you agreed that all the people enjoy the equal rights irrespective of caste, creed, color throughout the globe?
All
Madam,
the people, no, please repeat the question. What's your question? It's not that
are
clear.
you agreed that all the people enjoyed equal rights irrespective of caste, CRED, creed, color throughout the globe?
This question, this particular question which you have asked, it shows that you don't read that well. The point is, that this is under process. People are fighting for it. People are fighting for equality. Now, take the simple, why are we doing feminism, feministic literature? The women, they're getting a voice. It is through the post-colonial literature that we can hear the voice of the marginalized, the people who have suffered, who were there in the revolution, the effect, the loss of identity, the sense of alienation, all these things, are the post-colonial elements. And this is why, it is still under the process. We cannot claim that we still, do not consider it. There is somewhere or the other. And when you're talking throughout the world, the fight is still on, the revolution is still on, and let's see when we will be successful.
Thank you.
And these
Someone unmuted.
these form of literatures, this is the reason why post-colonial literature is being studied and it is being researched more and more, because it deals with those topics where we can hear, the voice of the subaltern, all these things, the people who have been troubled, who were, victimized, we can say, the women also, all the marginalized groups' voice can be heard. And that is why this literature is creating an awareness. And short stories, they are very short. They just tackle with a single situation. So now a story about a woman, who is being tortured every day, about a man, who was victimized in the partition. All these stories are read, and then the awareness is being created that we still are not equal. So please read all those stories and then, develop the sense, that is why I told you it has affected the psyche of the people. That is what I've just said in my lecture. Is it clear?
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
One query from Rajesh Biswas. Ma'am, can you mention some short stories about partition? Short stories books about partition.
Yeah, there is a collection of short story books, on partition where, we have Gulzar's, Rabi Par and all the other short stories are there. We've been teaching it in the syllabus. And we have we have one of Khushwant Singh also. It is on partition. And we have Sona Bolden's also, one collection that is on partition. And a more will be coming up. These three, just, you just feel the longer fiction is there. But these short stories the short story by Gulzar and the other, writers, they are the directors. So these stories, they have just changed, the view. The sense of nationalism was also infused. These stories help, and they are there. It is not being circulated because it has a lot of work yet needs to be translated. There's a lot in Bengali literature also that needs to be translated. But the awareness was created among the people, and now people have started writing. They are just, a few days back, I was just watching, I don't remember the name, it was from the anthology. It was about, the partition. The story was very nice and I was reading it. I've just forgotten the name. But in our mobile also, when we are just surfing the net, we get to see a lot of. Through Kindle also, I've read a number of collections. At present, it's not coming to my mind. But then there are certain stories, which just, force you to, it just sparks your mind and you're forced to think and read more and more.
Thanks a lot, madam. We'll move to another speaker. I would like to request Sri Siddhartha Sarkar to introduce another speaker, Dr. Subrata Sarkar, so that we can move to the speech of Dr. Subrata Sarkar. Siddhartha, are you there?
Sir, yes, sir. Am I
Okay,
audible?
now you, yes, you are audible.
Okay, okay, sir. Good evening. Now we will listen to Dr. Shubhabrata Sarkar. Shubhabrata Sarkar is presently working as an associate professor, Department of English, UG and PG Studies, Rishi Bankim Chandra College, Noihati, West Bengal. He has done his honors, masters, and PhD from the University of Kalyani. His PhD work was on European influence on post-1960 American drama. He has a few publications to his credit and is presently working on drama and theater arts, eco-criticism, literature from margins of class, caste, and gender, and ELT. Now I earnestly request Dr. Shubhabrata Sarkar to deliver his lecture on Untouchable Tales of Post-Colonial India, Dalit Micro-Narratives in English Translations. Hello.
Everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible, sir.
So thank you, Siddhartha sir, for this an introduction. Thank you, Professor.
My pleasure, sir.
For making such a solid ground for me to start a discussion. So, madam, you have stated almost everything thinking of stating before my paper. So it has given me a solid foundation. Thank you for your explication. Short story and development of Indian short stories, especially in English, in India. I acknowledge this opportunity. Dr. Parul Kumar of Ranaghat College has given me this opportunity. I thank Purnodai Mukhopadhyay, Professor Shubhendu Sarkar, Professor Soheli Mitra, Professor Siddhartha Sarkar. All are very well known to me, and for their love and kindness, I've got the opportunity to speak on a topic that is almost not relevant area of discussion. I find myself fortunate enough to find a place to speak at this national webinar on postcolonial elements in Indian short stories in English. However, instead of search for the postcolonial elements in Indian short stories, I have been allowed to present a paper on the untouchable tales of postcolonial India in English. As Professor Jha has already said, the writers are almost I could not find any proper Indian short story written in English by a Dalit writer. The Dalit short stories I here referred to as micro-narratives are by the Dalits and Dalits. These are composed in regional languages and then translated into English. I shall try to address some research questions related to the nature and, of course, the scope and function of these untouchable tales of India in general. And then in the second part of my discussion, I will analyze some selected short stories written in 4 major Indian languages: Hindi, Marathi, Malayalam, and Bengali, that are all now available in English translation. The selection is, of course, representative rather than based on random sampling because of a dearth of untouchable tales in an otherwise rich tradition of Indian writings in English or in English translation. As you know, English literary print culture that came to India during the period of British imperialism, and anything that was composed in English or is being printed and circulated in English has remained part of Macaulay's project, the project of linguistic and cultural imperialism. Therefore, any short story written either in English or in translation in English that is available in print, even in this post-independence period, is bound to contain colonial, post-colonial, or anti-colonial elements. The Dalit stories composed in regional languages and now translated into English to contain these elements, both in form and content. But the Dalit short stories in English translation suffer a double jeopardy. Number one, of being written by a Dalit writer, and number two, of being located in the periphery of elitist English. As we know, some tales are born to die and lose their toil in the dominant literary culture of overrated and overprescribed touchable tales. These untouchable tales by the Dalits hardly find a place in the book market, nor do they appear prescribed on the syllabus through English literature. These tales appear mainly in languages, but are soon by meta-narratives that perpetuate the hegemony of great inequality of pre-colonial feudalism and caste system, like the ever vacant list of no applicant found, of course, not found suitable, that adorn the websites flaunting list of reserved teaching and research posts all over India, including the colleges and universities of West Bengal. As a researcher, I personally find that I'm facing a problem with the crisis of finding such untouchable tales. And Dalit, I started with the school, but I could not find a single short story written by a Dalit writer in English. Even in I browsed through the text for higher studies in English in the old 1+1 UG syllabus. I found an outdated Old English epic, Beowulf, but I failed to find a single text written in English by a Dalit writer. Of Untouchable with Bakha, the untouchable scavenger hero, gave me some courage to speak. The newly introduced syllabus for undergraduate English courses across India, based on UGC modeled CBCS, definitely offers scope for an exclusion of Dalit short stories. Fortunately, in this list, I found Pray or The Shroud, Durga Bhai and Shubhas Vyam's graphic biography, Himayana, and G. Kalyan Rao's Telugu novel in this translation, Untouchable Scale. Now, interesting fact is that is also listed University of Kolani. This university that caters to 2 Dalit majority districts in Murshidabad in West Bengal. The micro-narratives of writers like Jotin Bala, Om Prakash Valmiki, Bama, Babura Bagul have also found a place in the syllabus of State University. Reading these short stories, I found them closer, much closer to the Indian reality than the stories of mainstream Anglophonic writers like Catherine Mansfield, Bates, James Joyce, or even Ruskin Bond and Salman Rushdie. In India, before independence, several writers like Munshi Premchand, Manik Bandyopadhyay, Mulk Raj Anand, and many others did pen some tales of the untouchables. But after independence, only a few mainstream writers like Mahashweta Devi presented Dalits as the main subject in their stories. Fortunately, Mahashweta Devi's short stories Draupadi has been included in the syllabus of Kolani University. In the 21st century, a paradigm shift became noticeable among the Dalit writers across India. Dalit age-old silence. And they are narrating their stories and printing press like Navayana, Oxford, Orient Black Swan, and Ababil are publishing Dalit writings. Dalits in Indian subcontinent for more than 3,000 years were not years recite poems or write their tales. A liturgical text like Purusha Shukta, 1200 to 900 BC, sometime it was composed, a hymn in the Rig Veda, described the creation of the world from the sacrifice of man, from whose mouth, arms, thighs, and feet emerge the four classes or varnas of society based on graded inequality. This was the first representation of a system of stratification known as caste based on graded inequality and discrimination. Gautam Buddha argued against this divine hierarchy and talked about abolishing this caste system. Caste distinction and caste-based oppression got temporarily annihilated, especially during the rule of King Ashoka. But the counter-revolutionary forces, according to Ambedkar and Kosambi, gained strength after, again during the Mitra in the 2nd century AD. The rigid codes that relegated the Aboriginals, Dalits, and women to the margins of social hierarchy were once again reinforced. Or Manusmriti or Manushanhita, 2nd century AD, written in Sanskrit, that codified the fourfold structure of society, described privileges and disabilities according to status, and identified despised groups outside the four varnas, groups that will later be identified as untouchables. Literary culture in India has been so lopsided in favor of the ruling caste, in favor of the ruling gender, and definitely in favor of the majority, race, and religion. Tom Paine's rationalist dream that a constitution, literature also has a constitution. A constitution is a contract written by the people of the generation that follows it. This constitution, Tom Paine's rationalist dictum, turns turtle. Ancient law rulers might have served the people belonging to that period. They are no longer good for us in modern democratic societies. Antonin Artaud's famous call of the 1930s, I quote, "Masterpieces of the past for the past for us find no place in the dominant literary culture in India. Thus, literatures from the margins of caste have never been allowed any space in the dominant literary tradition in India. And these texts, the marginal texts, the oral narratives, are all sacrificed, like the thumb of Eklavya or the head of Shambuk or Barbarika on the altar of caste-based hierarchical social structures." Untouchable tales definitely found some print space in contemporary literary market, mainly due to Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's clarion call to all the Dalits of India to, I quote, "educate, agitate, organize." Writing is perhaps the most potent weapon to realize this goal and can lead India towards a truly modern society shaped on the ideals of liberty, justice, equality, and fraternity. We, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to ensure these ideals, miserably failed because of graded inequality prevalent in human society, in Indian society in particular. The age-old prejudices based on race, caste, gender, regional, and caste class identities have retained permanence in like indelible ink. Without annihilation of caste system, according to Dr. Ambedkar, fraternity is impossible. And without fraternity, words like equality will all remain printed in letters and will never be absorbed in the general spirit of civilization. The Dalit Panther movement of the 1970s in Maharashtra brought Ambedkarite ideals to the fore and worked for a complete independence from Indian feudalism and caste system. Similar literary movements in India carried forward the legacy of medieval poet activists like Ramanujar, Ravidas, Namdev, Kabir, Guru Nanak, Chaitanya, and the work did not last. And whatever they did, that was not reflected to the tradition that followed. To annihilate the graded inequality of caste system and religious untouchable tales of the untouchable characters in Indian epics, micro-narratives within the meta-narratives, epical narratives. So I repeat, the untouchable tales of the untouchable characters in Indian epics, like the stories of Ekalavya, Shambhala, Shauri, Hidimba, Barbarika, Shurpanakha, Satyavati, and so many. We're just left to lose a plot in the grand war and property rights. There was a systematic erosion, marginalization of the Dalit as a subject in the grand narrative, caste forces, and the same trend remained in the Indian English writings after independence. During the British colonial period in India, there were reforms that did protect Hindu widows from the pyre of their dead husband, allowed them remarriage. Rights were not provided to a majority of Indians belonging to the margins of caste, race, gender, and class. Even after independence, when these rights got enshrined by the Constitution of India in 1950, the hegemony of oppressive, irrational, outdated, and discriminatory codes of Manu remained unchallenged in the material and spiritual life of a majority of Indians. The inequality based on birth and biological appearance affected followers of other religions in India, and the same discriminatory politics remained valorized and undisputed in Indian literary culture. Lyotard, in the Post Knowledge 1979, argues that we have ceased to believe that meta or grand narratives are adequate to represent and contain us all. Everyone now has her or his own perspective and a story to tell. Modern allow everyone to tell stories. Democratization of literary culture. Our modernity has allowed us to become alert, more alert to difference, to diversity, to the multi-plural existence, even incompatibility of our aspirations. And for that reason, this 21st century postmodernity is characterized by an abundance of micronarratives. These little stories from the fourth space contribute to the making of Dalit micronarratives. By Multrajan created a sensation by presenting sweeper and action cleaner Bakka with richness of detail to convey the fury of the untouchables. But in spite of its critical acclaim, the work could not create a niche in the literary world for such untouchable tale. In this sense, however, a few works in English translation are available. These stories find little space in the series titled Contemporary Indian Short Stories. Stories Adivasi Will Not Dance by Hansda Sovendra Shekhar is set in Dalit characters take the center stage of this. There is a troop master, Mangal Murmu, who refuses to perform for the president of India. Suren and Geeta, a love-blind couple, wait with quiet natal word, hoping their blue baby will turn pink. So move to Vadodara as migrant workers, only to find that they stop eating meat. In the anthology, in small letters, stories written by Dalit writers, edited by M.R. Renukumar and translated by Sriram and Ravi Shankar. Selections are made from Malayalam.
Sir, audible? Sir, you are audible?
And
Purnodaya, sir?
So, brother, Something, sir. Subrata sir. Now, say something. Subrata is not audible.
Yes.
I'm
So, yes, you are audible now.
Okay.
Yes.
audible. Okay. This audible. Hello.
Actually, sir, voice breaking, low bandwidth, showing low bandwidth. Check your network, sir.
So shall I have to repeat a portion or shall I continue?
Yeah, now audible.
I don't know if I can publish now. Now am I audible now?
Yes, you are audible, sir.
Okay.
কিছু বলছেন।
Shubhabrata, Shubhabrata, I think there is some network problem on your side. So better speak from a little while earlier. We missed about 2 minutes of your lecture.
Okay, okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you. That's what I was asking.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yes.
So I was about the works translation that are available in print. In 1936, the novel Untouchable created a sensation in the life of a sweeper and a latrine cleaner, Bakha, with richness of tale to convey the fury of the untouchables. But in spite of its critical acclaim, not create a space in the literary world for the untouchable tale. In this century, we have translations. Dalit stories are now available. Contemporary Indian short stories published by Sahitya Academy contains a few stories by the Dalit. A collection of stories devoted entirely to the Dalits. Adivasi Will Not Dance by Savendra Shekhar, set in Jharkhand, is now available. In this collection, we have Dalit characters who take the center stage. Troop master Mangal Murmu, he refuses to perform for the president. There we find Suren and Geeta, a love blind couple. They wait with quiet desperation after neonatal, hoping that their blue baby will turn pink. Panumuni and Biram move to Vadodara as migrant worker, only to find that they must stop eating meat. In the anthology, written in small letters, in the lowercase, Don't Want Caste, Malayalam stories by Dalit writers, edited by M.R. Renukumar and translated by A.G. are made from several decades of Dalit writings in Malayalam. The Oxford Indian Anthology of Tamil writing, edited by D. Ravi Kumar and Azhar Ghassan, is also a component of writing and activities of Dalits from the late 19th century to the present in Tamil Nadu. Survival and Other Stories. That is a product of UGC funded of Vidyasagar University, edited by Dr. Indranil Acharya. This anthology also edited by Professor Dr. Shubhendu Sarkar. Most of the stories in this anthology speak of Dalit lives lived on the edge, negation and revolt. In this collection, we have a story of a mason tortured for asserting his human rights. There's a story of a witch doctor who holds a woman responsible for the illness of her grandchild. A jamindar is there who is seen taunting people for their ancestry, means birth. A progressive-minded son of a corrupt politician is turned down by his Dalit lover, believing that society is ready to accept their union. So endosmosis is not. Stories of Social Awakening, Reflections of Dalit Refugee Lives of Bengal. Another anthology of short stories written by Jotin Bag appeared in 2017, translated by Dr. Joydeep Sharongi. The stories deal with the issues of partition, migration, refugee crisis, and the condition of the Dalits in Bengal. 2 anthologies containing Marathi Dalit stories are also available in print. For example, translation from modern Marathi Dalit stories, and another anthology, Poison Bread, both edited by Arjun Dangle. Then there is an anthology of Telugu Dalit writing, edited and translated by G. Shyamala, G. Ramaswamy, Purushottam. All these stories showcase the works of nearly 80 intellectuals. The stories in this anthology present Dalit perspectives on caste oppression. These stories protest against a social order that relegated the Dalits to a life of abject poverty. And so we have such stories. The literature is history is totally wiped out. So this was the first part of my discussion. In the second part of this research problem related to untouchable tales of post-colonial India with special references to some selected macro narratives. For Urdu or Hindi, I have selected a pre-independence text, Kafan, or The Shroud, that was published in 1936 by Premchand. From Marathi, I have selected Baburao Bagul's I or Mother. It is translated in 1992. From Bengali, I have taken Jatin Bala's Payer Tolar Mati or The Firm Ground, that was translated in 2012. And from Malayalam, Mia Kulpa, written in 2013 by Raju K. Vasu. Premchand's and Baburao Bagul's Mother appeared in Sahitya Academy Anthology, Indian Short Stories 1900 to 2000, edited by E.V. Ramakrishnan, while Jatin Bala's Firm Ground appeared in Survival and Other Stories 2013, and Raju Vasu's Mia Kulpa was included in Don't Broadcast Malayalam Short Stories by Dalit Writers in 2017. The first story, Munshi Premchand's The Shroud, you are all familiar with the story that was originally published in 1936 as Kafan. It was claims that it is composed in Urdu. Whatever the debate is, it is translated now in English. It was translated in 1970s by the Sahitya Academy. So it was composed. I regard this work as of Premchand, a dialectical work. So this story is set in a village on a dark, chilly winter night, and there is the story of a father, Ghisu, and his son Madhav. Budhiya, Madhav's young wife, is sick and is expecting a child. She's not present in the stage. She's just heard groaning inside. Ghisu and Madhav are presented as lazy, dishonest, superstitious. They are labor-related work. By birth, and lowest in India's highly structured social hierarchy. They refuse to do agriculture that is available, we say, and prefer to live on leftovers and by cheating others. Ghishu has somehow managed to earn himself the lowest reputation in the village and to survive without engaging in honest work. When the pregnant Budhiya dies, they simply go about the village, beating the chest and wailing, I quote, according to the old tradition, unquote, to get money from the shroud and firewood needed to cremate the dead body. They for the cremation, but give second thoughts about purchasing a shroud that is going to be burned anyway. They find themselves, I quote, or other, and they enter the village liquor shop. They drink the lonely manner of tigers enjoying chill in the jungle and sink into drunkenness. They initially have qualms about not purchasing a shroud, but they systematize their decision with praises for the dead woman. I quote from the text, even dying, she got us fine things to eat and drink. They find them their hearts. They dance frantically until they collapsed, dead drunk. The story is definitely loaded in carnivalesque, parody, subversion, and paradox. The temple soon dissolves, and the next morning, that is not stated in the play, in the story, they will have to face the same problem. Unlike Premchand's other stories like Thakur's Well, Thakur Ka Kua, or Sadgati, that present untouchability as a curse of Indians, foregrounds the poverty, ignorance of the Dalit characters. The social and religious system controls their life, the basic social norms, and seem to take every opportunity to use them. They remain trapped in the cage of and caste system. The becomes the main victim of poverty, the main victim of caste system and exploitative patriarchal society. So this is interesting, like the painting of Bruegel, where we have just the leg disappearing, the legs of Icarus disappearing in the sea. We have this Budhiya in this, who is the subject of the play. So we must shift our focus from those Dalit characters to the Dalit female character of the story. So the social and religious system that controls their life, These two characters reject the basic social norms and they seem to take every opportunity to beat the system, use the system. They remain trapped in oppressive feudalism and caste system. Life, on the other hand, becomes a victim of exploited society. However, writers like Premchand, although sympathetic to the Dalits, could not transcend his own past position to draw an authentic picture of the Dalit life, especially the stigma of being born a Dalit in caste-ridden feudocracy. Liberalism portrayed the untouchable as abject, submissive, pitiful, resigned to malice of caste and destiny. This, in the Gandhian liberal philosophy that does not challenge the basis of divine origin related to caste system, has been addressed by the Dalit writers who challenge the hegemonic conventions and value systems in order to realize a truly casteless society. The double jeopardy of Budhya, the female character of the Shroud, as a Dalit and wife of a Dalit in the Shroud, is presented by Premchand. She is denied a shroud for cremation when she is dead. Thus, she is a victim of both patriarchy and caste system. The writers seek to challenge the hegemonic Brahmanical discourses and their caste prejudice. The life of a Dalit female character is further jeopardized in my next story, Babura Bagul's short story Mother. Here, the mother, named just anonymous, she is poor, she belongs to an undefined caste, she is a widow, she is left to look after a son named Pandu. The setting here is the urban slums of Mumbai, the caste-based ghettos of modern Indian metropolis, the ghettos of the migrant workers. Unlike the story, Babul has incorporated the voice, the aspiration, the struggle, and the triple jeopardy of a poor Dalit widow, left at the mercy of dominant forces of class, caste, and gender. And a widow's life is further jeopardized by the absence of her husband or a grown-up son to protect her. The dual oppressive forces of caste and gender work simultaneously to create an intensity of oppression which becomes unbearable for a Dalit woman. Through work and labor, she is able to emancipate herself from economic drudgery. She remains burdened with workload, both in the construction site and with the task of looking after her son, household work. Pandu's father, a migrant worker in search of work, he is diagnosed with tuberculosis, and Pandu's mother has to work all on the family bread. In spite of her economic independence, she is a victim of domestic violence and unbearable mental torture. Suspects his wife of selling herself. He tries to deface and disfigure her to control her body. Pandu's mother has a twofold battle, both the caste outside as well as in the patriarchal male-dominated household. Gets a revenge over her husband by hastening her husband to death. She works ceaselessly throughout the story. She is seen working to her son, Pandu, resisting the advances of several men. But aspires for a road, Pandu turns against her. She becomes an untouchable in her own house. Pandu says, "Whore, I spit on your clothes." These clothes are given by the overseer. These are Pandu's last words to her before he runs out of the house. Interestingly, Babura Bagul's story focuses on the figure of the Dalit widow than on the woman's position. The patriarchy and the rigid caste system make her life miserable. Her suffering, humiliation, and final estrangement from her son reflect how the forces of religion, caste, and gender are all linked together. Stories should be taught for students both in school as well as in colleges. In Jala's short story, much closer to us, translated as the poem by Professor Ashok Sengupta and published in the anthology of Bangla Dalit stories in 2030, reveal the suffering of the entire Dalit family at the hands of oppressive, predatory, and violent ruling forces of caste, class, and gender. Haladhar belongs to a Shudra caste. He is a skilled master by profession and is a strong man both physically and mentally. He has the courage to assert his right of equality and entitlement. What Gokul Chakraborty notices Haladhar doing some rituals. This Brahmin gets irritated as similar rituals are reserved for Brahmins. Haladhar retorts, claiming that instead of libation, he's just performing a ritual, hoping that the water from his hand will end up in the rice field. The Brahmins feel irritated by the belongs to, quote from the text, lowest of the lowly caste. Like the untouchability word has been abolished by the Indian Constitution in 1950, this word low caste and high caste, low and high should be abolished. So Haladhar act of subversion is supported by a sarcastic comment. I quote from the text, just as the libation water gets to your forefathers, Torpon, that water goes to the forefathers, so do these drops from my hand end up in my rice field. Goku and draws angry circles in the water surface. Filled with rage, and the members of the ruling class decide to punish Haladhar. And I quote from the text, it will take us only a moment to remove the ground beneath your feet. Pair Talai Mati. Haladhar is falsely implicated with the charge of stealing the jewelry of Bhavani's temple. His innocence proves futile. He is tied to a tree trunk, lashed with whip. The arrogant Haladhar's wife and the newly born 5-day child out of their house, molest her, and their house is destroyed by fire. But instead of succumbing to the caste violence, Haladhar turns his rage and despair into a firm resolve to resist. He feels like a reborn man and decides to create an identity which is not based on his caste. In this story, Jyotimbala exposes the struggles faced by the victimizable hands of victimizers. The story concludes with an assertion of dignity and pride. I quote from the text, excellently translated by Professor Ashok. I quote from the text, slowly, however, Haladhar found his rage and despair being replaced by a firm resolve to resist, as if his battered and bloodied body was being reborn from this lifetime of injustice and suffering to find a new selfhood. Haladhar felt that he was the first man of a new world. Unquote. This resolve to annihilate the entire social structure built on the false edifice of caste marks the beginning of the new Dalit writings of protest and revolt. And the story of Jyotimbala definitely validates this resolve to fight any form of caste-based oppression perpetuated by the lawbreakers and lynchers of Indian society. Lawbreakers and lynchers of Indian society include such texts in our syllabus. In the last story, with which I will conclude my discussion, K. Vasu. It is a Malayalam short story named Mea Culpa, my fault. English, Mea Culpa is a Latin phrase, written in 2013 and translated by A.G. Sriram. This is an assertion of Dalit pride, and the story supports the idea of reclamation of primordial rights. The story is set in Pope John Hostel in Kerala. So we are moving into a different location, the southernmost corner tip of India, and now we are moving into the plight of the Dalit Christians. The narrative focalizes on Samuel, the central character, and his sudden realization of the fault lines created by the caste system among the followers of Christianity, among the followers of modernity. Is one of the most advanced, literate, and definitely progressive society. Samuel, who hoped to, I quote, soar into the endless possibility that independence has opened up for a Dalit Christian, is reminded in the story of his origin and limitations. I quote from the story, Pelayan and Parayan folk, you better know your limit and stay within those. Eat what you get for free, put in your corner and behave yourself, else we will knock you out. I repeat, Pelayan and Parayan, these are two Dalit caste in Kerala, the caste of untouchable Kerala. Pelavan and Paravan folk better know their limits and stay within those. What you get for free, stay put in your corner and behave yourself. Else, we will knock you out. So from the stories, the Dalit untouchables are knocked out because based in the stories, they might talk transcendence of the limits. So he is a first year BA honor student, Shelwan Samuel. So he is also aspiring something new. Dalit is forced into his consciousness and he experiences an epiphany. This epiphany is almost like Joyce's epiphany of the cross in Arabic. So I repeat from the text, was not the lacerated Christ, but the dark smiling man he had seen just a short while ago. Christ, who had been on the cross, was sitting on a stepping stone. The crucified dark man was smiling. The story finally concludes with an acceptance of the fault of born a Dalit, the fault of asserting self-pride and to aspire to transcend the limit of caste. The concluding penultimate paragraph continues like this. Samuel is forced by his hostel roommates to confess his own sins of defying the upper caste. I repeat, the caste values ingrained in Indian society, even among the Christians, even among the Christians. So what he says at the end, my fault, my great fault, mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. The story ends in this note, a note of stigma, a note of shame, a note that will perhaps create from these hostels where the posts are reserved for those who are relegated by the caste oppression to the margins, the voices that will be muted. So this muted existence of the Dalit will definitely spring. The silent spring of Dalit awakening has definitely found a flowering, to use G. Kalava Rao's novel's title that is prescribed for the UG course of Kolkata University, honors course, Untouchable Spring. So I repeat, the silent spring of Dalit awakening will definitely find a flowering as untouchable spring of revolutionary writing. With this hope and aspiration, I would like to conclude my lecture and invite questions. So to conclude, I would like to request the scholars to take up the issues related to the Dalit writings. And we will find really a treasure house of writings that are muted, writings that are erased, writings that are not yet translated from so many regional languages, especially Bangla to English, and to bring those in the text prescribed for your study, prescribed for your research, prescribed for your understanding of human values, prescribed for your understanding of Indian Constitution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Subroto. It is an awesome presentation from our nice looking speaker. So thank you. Thanks a lot. I express my hearty gratitude to both the speakers. Today's webinar is informative and illuminating, and I am sure that definitely the participants are benefited by today's lectures. Now it is time for again interaction or questions, queries. Is there any question from the participant? Tapos babu আছে কি কোনো question?
ইউটিউব চ্যাট বক্সে কিছু আছে, আমি স্ক্রিনটা শেয়ার করার চেষ্টা করছি।
সুব্রত question.
Okay, just
Instead of question, the participants can also give their opinions regarding our Yeah, topics.
Unmute
They can
if
make their
anyone has
observations regarding the
question.
topic.
Okay.
Okay, participants are requested to give their feedback a bit
Their
about this
observations on the topic.
webinar.
Yeah, with reference to the topic.
So, sir, can you see the from YouTube chat box? Yeah.
So, Subrata, দেখছো কি?
Read the question. Yeah, but it is written so small, I cannot read.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
It is so small, yeah. So, at a distance from
Now.
read. Can you just read the questions? Yeah.
The post-colonial aliens in India sought to rescue caste restrictions.
Yeah, just repeat. So you talked about postmodern elements. Please repeat the question.
This is
Okay.
India's short stories rescue caste restrictions.
Postmodernism is a jargon, critical jargon. So we are in past. So I was talking about 3000 years. Manusmriti is still there. So pre-modern society cannot talk about postmodern society. So we are trying to bring back the pre-modern and talking about post. So this is the paradox of Indian critical debates. So postmodernity is the condition. Yes, Lyotard has that we no longer believe in the meta narratives. We are not fools now, no longer. Postmodernity has taught us to dispute things, question things, to agitate against things, and to speak out our stories. So Dalit stories definitely are a part of this new project where meta narratives are being replaced by micro narratives. Testimonials are being replaced by the grand epics, grand histories. So we have our own histories to tell from the below, and we are the makers of history. And if the Dalits writers, Dalit characters appear in these micro stories and they can narrate their stories, they will be victim characters like Bakha of Untouchable. Make the thing clear.
Yes, Sudhir sir. Are you asking any question? Sudhir Dasgupta.
Do you want to ask
Yes,
any question?
yes, I have
Rajesh
written
Vishnu
the
has a
question on the chat box.
Yeah, Rajesh Vishnu of caste system irrelevant in Indian society. See, Samuel Well is a modern student, 2013, studying in a hostel and he is facing the same onslaught. So caste system is ingrained in the of Indian religious casteist consciousness that is deeply steeped in feudalism. The constitution is a holy book, but we do not swear by the constitution by following the laws. So see the matrimonial couple, see the things that are heard every time, every moment in these academic lectures. So hood has been based by a definite assertion of self-dignity and self-respect.
Okay.
Sudhir sir.
Sudeep,
Yes.
Sudeep,
Yes, yes.
you have any
I
question?
can hear, sir. I can hear, sir.
Sudeep,
Good evening, Subrata, sir. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, you are audible.
Yes, my question is regarding sir's comment. Sir has said that the tales of past are past. They don't have any Dalit voice in them. So my question is, there is a theory regarding our epic Mahabharata that it is written by Vedavyasa, who was a Shuta by birth. Shuta means the chariot maker. So he is also a Dalit, a person belonging from Dalit community. Later changed. This is a theory, though there are no enough information to support my statement. But my question is that, so sir's comment is justified, or what sir think about it?
What is your
Dr. Shubhodip Chakraborty for yeah, for bringing me back to this debate. So, untouchable Bhakha is the real untouchable of Indian society. Said yes, Mulk Raj Anand writes from the perspective of class and caste, addresses both. I remember discussion between Mulk Raj Anand and Tariq Ali, where Tariq Ali talked about the prevalence of the same untouchability of the manual scavenger in Pakistan. There, the Christians are forced to do this task of manual scavenger. So Tariq Ali questioned him that whether it's possible to present the stigma, the pain, the agony of a Dalit character through a tale that is written by a non-Dalit. So Mulk Raj Anand himself confessed that objectively you can present the tale, but you cannot try with the tale. I can make this clear. Second, the question was regarding Ved. Vyasa, we know, is related to Shatyavati. I mentioned Shatyavati, Matsya of Mahabharata. All the epics are written by Dalit characters. All the epics. Yeah, because we do not know about the authenticity of the writing. So Valmiki, you know the history of Valmiki, you know the history of Veda Vyasa. So all these characters are Dalit writings. But these writings, like the work of a scientist, when it moves on to the hand of the ruling class, and a ruling class like King Pushyamitra, the rewriting of history takes place. The rewriting of literary text, scripture takes place. Even Manusmriti has been rewritten, according to D.D. Kosambi, has been rewritten under the rule of King Pushyamitra as a counter-revolution to the works that were present before that, and works that were produced during the era of Buddhism in India. Ownership of land property, rightful ownership of power and privilege, of rule and governance, these type of codes were imposed on a majority of Indians. Other religions too came under this fold, and reverse colonialism of Hinduism on these religion made the things worse. So now we talk about Dalit Christians, Dalit Sikh, Dalit Buddhism. But if we see the scripture, say of Sikhism, the main scripture contains, Guru Nanak Granth Sahib contains the writings of 18 Dalit writers. Okay, including Kabir, Namdev, these are all included. Ravidas. What happens to the text? Today, the real followers of Sikhism, they have divided into two groups. They have Dalit Sikh and upper caste Sikh. Although Sikhism is the most modern of religion, that's about a casteless society like Buddhism. So Ved Vyasa's writing went into the hands of ruling class who rewrote the work, and the work that we read is the Mahabharata, a meta-narrative written by the ruling caste, ruling class, ruling gender. Therefore the stories of Draupadi, therefore the stories of Gandhari, Kunti, Satyavati, they are all missing. The story of Sita, gone wrong. Where are these stories? Sita Nama is there, Sita will tell her story. Draupadi will tell her story. Where are the stories? Ved Vyasa was definitely very objective while including these characters from the epics. And Eklavya stories, Shambhuka stories, Shaburi story, Shurpanakha stories, these are now being retold by the Dalit writers. So from the perspective of Shurpanakha, we have another interpretation, a tale of revenge. A man, an alien, refuses her and then taunts her. Oh, go flirt with my young, handsome bachelor. So jungle bound Lakshmana. So flirt with him. And what he does? Cuts her nose, defaces her. Okay, like acid torture. And what happens after that? So that is a revenge story. So see, from the perspective of Shurpanakha, the story turns turtle. Meta-narrative comes into a micro-narrative, but these are muted. The story of Hidimba, the story of Barbarika, the story of Babruvahan. Where are they? They are not the warriors. The best warrior, Barbarika, his head was cut and mounted. He was a witness to the Mahabharata. When Krishna asked, who actually fought the battle? Who won the battle? The battle was won in 18 days. So Barbarika simply stated, it was you, your deception, your lies, your falsehood. Yes, it won the battle. I'm quoting from the text.
Thank you, sir. Then,
Yeah.
sir, then what is the importance of Karna in the story? Is it not a Dalit identity?
Yes, the story of Karna. Where is Karna? Karna is muted. Karna is supposed to be the ruler of Hastinapur. Where is Karna? So he has been given a Rajutva, a small state to rule in order to play in the war games. War games scripted by the dominant caste forces. And in order to allow him to participate, hire him to be a fighter in the Kaurava army, he is being given a lordship. Lord Clive also got this lordship. He went back to England, brought 5 villages, got Sarupadi, and became the member of the house. So this is simply the same thing. So Lord Clive did not belong to the upper caste, upper feudal class of British Empire. As a clerk, he joined the East India Company, went back, bought his caste pride, became a member of the House of Lords with money. But that is not possible in India. If an untouchable opens an industry, so first 20 millionaires, billionaires, trillionaires, never will that person enter. He enters into the war field. So Kshatriyas are always valorized in the war field. If he writes a scripture or writes a short story, the surnames are important. Surnames should be abolished. Total annihilation of caste. Ambedkar is the only thing that is required for Indian society is total.
Any question, please ask. You have some question in chat box.
If there is any question.
Please,
Okay.
after Islam, asking some 3 or 4 question. And does short stories give the whole idea of life?
What is the question?
Does short story give the whole idea of a life?
Does short story give a whole idea of life? Question to that's maybe answered by Professor Subrata or Madam.
It does. A short story cannot give the whole idea of life. As I had mentioned earlier in my lecture, that is, it is just a seed of an idea. So only one aspect at a time is dealt with. If you're really interested, naturally you have to read stories, which have the stories, the writers who have experimented with the issues of the life. So whole idea, short stories, if you continuously go on reading short stories, naturally your moral values will improve. There are types of stories, the moral stories, the historical background stories, stories about valorization, as I pointed out in the elements of my lecture. So it gives, the concept is there, but it is just a single idea. As I've already told you that it is a seed of an idea. It's just the original thing. Now, how you change yourself? If you with which character do you identify? It is a single character thing. A short story, in a short story, only a single character and only a single idea. So you read, and then the character with whom you can identify yourself, naturally you can change your life. That is there. You learn a lot.
Okay, I think.
Is horizon or Dalits term is applied for down horizon or Dalits? So
The question.
I think.
So I will please
Dalit.
repeat the question. What is the question?
Which is the appropriate for horizon or Dalits? Which is the appropriate term for downtrodden people?
Downtrodden.
Oh, that is somewhat highly debatable. Which is the
critical debate going on?
I think it is very
now. Downtrodden. Everyone is equal. So down class, caste, gender identities. These should not be related. So everyone is equal. So downtrodden is also again a word. Challenged, you can say yes. Dalit is a word that includes all those who are marginalized, who are oppressed by the dominant feudal system, by the caste system, by by the patriarchal system, by race, by religion. So it is an
God.
umbrella term.
Okay. Now we are nearing the end of today's webinar. It is a very lively discussion. I also thank participants for lively interaction. I express my hearty gratitude to, in spite of certain interruptions, today's webinar is illuminating and informative. It really benefits a lot, particularly to students and other participants. Now I request Dr. Subhendra Sarkar to carry on vote of thanks. Are you there, Subhendu? I
Yes.
okay, you then carry on. Vote of thanks.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
It is audible but not visible.
Okay.
Professor
So
Shubhendu
should
Sarkar,
I
please
be
be
visible?
visible. We want to see your face.
This
Okay.
Please be visible.
click
Show your
on
handsome face.
Just
Yeah.
a second.
my
No,
video.
actually, I'm not at all adept with, huh? What to do now? Start my video. I should press this.
Yes, sir.
Video.
Click on
Am
video.
I visible now?
Click on start my
Visible
video.
now?
Yes.
Yes,
Now
you
you
are
are
visible. You were visible. Yes.
You see, this is the first time in my
Look at
life that
expression
I'm
chart.
appearing
Yes.
here or any other digital platform. So you see, it has been a very invigorating, educative, and entertaining session. Now, the term post-colonialism, we should be thankful to both the speakers because both of them have uh, actually tried to make us think that how expansive this word can become at times. Generally, this is a feeling that post-colonialism has to do only with British imperialism in our context, actually. But in fact, post-colonialism is stretched till today, till colonialism exists. And colonialism, I think there is a technical problem.
Carry on.
Anyway,
Carry on.
am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, you are audible.
Okay. You see, colonialism has to be understood not in the context of uh, any foreign power capturing or subjugating a particular country. It has to be understood as the notion of a repressive state. And as a repressive state, it can either be a state that has been captured by any foreign power or can be even understood when it is captured by so-called the natives of a country. Now, Dr. Shubhabrata Sarkar's lecture was very perceptive in this regard because, you see, colonialism, it seems that it still exists even today because the plight of the Dalits, and not only the Dalits, the Adivasis, the women, the people of the Northeast, people of Kashmir, all these testify that colonialism still exists, and post-colonialism is rather a challenge to that concept of colonialism, and therefore it still becomes very relevant. Anyway, my job is to is to provide this vote of thanks, and indeed it has been a very educating and entertaining session, as I've already mentioned. I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to the Department of English, to Dr. Arunadhay Mukherjee, to our principal, to the entire technical staff. Without them, this would not have been possible at all. And this has become the new normal. You see, we have to, I don't know for how long we'll be meeting on such platforms. And the soon we meet, the better it is for all of us, not only teachers, but also students. They also get a chance to interact. Though I saw not many of them have participated, at least on this platform. I do not know about the YouTube channel because I'm not very conversant with such technical things. So from the Department of English, I extend again my heartfelt thanks to the entire student community who have participated, the teachers, and it has been, a very invigorating session. I hope the students have been immensely benefited by the discussions that we have heard. Dr. Jha, Dr. Sarkar, both of you, from the bottom of our hearts, we thank all of you. So let's carry this memory with all of us, and let's hope that we keep on engaging ourselves with such interesting topics in the future. Good night to all of you.
With this vote, thanks. Today, let me draw a curtain over today's webinar. Now, with this sweet memory of both of you, Dr.
Thank
Sarkar and Dr. Punita ji, will carry for a long time with this sweet memory. So let me take leave of you with this sweet memory of the
thank
students, of the speakers, and of all. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Okay. Well, this is
Thank you,
the end of
everyone. Thank you, madam. Okay, everyone, for audience. Thank you, teachers.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Ahmed Mukherjee, sir.
Okay, okay, ma'am.
And
Okay.
for all those of members. It was because of you that we were just invited. First time we've come around over there. And I think we'll be having more discussion. Your lecture was excellent, sir. Shubrata Sarkar, sir.
Your
Yes.
your lecture actually inspired me
That
and gave me the base.
it just opened, like now we are prompted to read more and more of Dalit literature. You just
Thank you, madam.
excited us. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
It
madam.
was very nice. It was wonderful listening to you.
Thank you,
Okay.
madam. We have thoroughly enjoyed the entire session, madam. Under your
Yeah.
leadership, the session went very well. Okay, and the organizers
Okay,
are also very good, very cooperative. Thank you, madam. Okay, we'll
thank
meet
you.
you on these platforms.
We'll be
Okay.
meeting the same platform
Yes.
again. These are okay.
Thank you. I end this now. Thank you.